Happy Tuesday, everybody. Today is April 27th, 2021, and today's guest is Chad Sylvester from Exodus Trail Cameras. All right. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to the Fall Podcast this week. We have another great episode 158 to be exact. And like I said earlier, today's guest is the owner, founder of Exodus Trail Cameras, Chad Sylvester. Today's episode is a very good one, and we talk a lot about Exodus as a whole, but we also get into the weeds on how basically trail cams, how they changed the way Chad scouts and hunts and how he approaches things. That's not the whole conversation what we talk about. There's a lot of other things in here also, but it's just a good conversation. Chad's a really cool guy. This is the first time I ever got to talk to Chad. I appreciate him coming on and really letting me, pick his brain about Exodus and other things as well. So I'm going to kind of leave that right there. I don't want to get too much too deep into what we're going to be talking about. I want you guys to enjoy it firsthand, listening to it from Chad. So a couple housekeeping things before we do get into this. Go to IamHumanimal.com. Check out all of our new stories, new content. We got written word, we got blog. We got episodes on there, new episodes, semi-live here, turkey season. This week we're dropping 2 new episodes from the last couple days. By the time you're listening to this, they might be live. If not, they're coming this week. So 2 really good hunts. The one hunt with Casey's son Ryder, unbelievable hunt. It was really cool. Really fast, to be honest with you. Got him right off the roost. But probably the second biggest bird I've ever been a part of and seen taken. Giant beard. Yeah, it is a giant beard, but it's a giant bird. I want you guys to watch that. So go over to the website, IamHumanimal.com. Check all that stuff out. And I think that's basically all I got for this week. Thank you guys for all the support, all the downloads. Hopefully you guys enjoy this week's episode with Chad Sylvester. So I'm going to kick it over to that interview, and thank you guys very much. All right, welcome back to the Fall Podcast, and today I have Chad Sylvester from Exodus Trail Cams on. Chad, welcome to the podcast, and thank you very much for coming on, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm pretty pumped up to have a conversation today. It should be exciting.
I am too. I just told you off record. When I record podcast, it's like a release for me. It's like a getaway. I like doing it. It just kind of let my hair down and just talk deer hunting and strategy and everything to go with it because, just like you and everybody else out there, you get wrapped up in life week to week, and it's like this is kind of my release. So I'm excited about this.
Absolutely. Yeah, me too.
Well, cool, man. I do want to start off first. I want you to kind of give a brief bio of, people that might listen to this that don't know who Exodus is and know who you are. So kind of give everybody that little elevator. Yeah. This is who I am and what I do. Sure.
Yeah. We'll give you the brief elevator speech. So I'm Chad Sylvester, co-owner, co-founder of Exodus Outdoor Gear, which is essentially Exodus Trail Cameras. We reside and call home base Northeast Ohio, around the Warren, Ohio area, which is just a stone throw away from the Pennsylvania state line. So we're in the eastern part of the state. But Exodus is a direct-to-consumer company that we launched back in 2015. So we've been at it in May. It'll be 6 years. In May will be our 6-year anniversary. So we're beyond, we're beyond a startup, but we're still not what I would call a major force or a major player in the industry. I mean, we're still a relatively small company. But everything that we do really revolves around that business model. I know that, it seems these days direct-to-consumer is a kind of a buzzword or marketing term that gets thrown around a ton. And there's often companies that say they're D2C and are really omni-channel, but since the inception of Exodus, we've been D2C. And really coming to market, we saw just really 2 main niches or 2 main areas that needed to be addressed in the trail camera marketplace. One of them was product longevity, trying to get cameras to last longer than a dang year. And then the other was just to have a support system in place to not only provide customer service, but also product support and product education.
Sure.
Because, trail cameras have been around, well, the digital trail cameras have been around since the early 2000s. And so we've had people using these things for, 15 plus years. And there's really never been an entity that has taken the forefront or taken leadership on educating people around how these things actually work, how you can get more out of them, and the best way to use them. So that's kind of, if you were to wrap up our mission statement in just a few short words, it would be, we're a D2C trail camera company that wants to make trail camera users have better experiences through our content, through our products.
That's perfect. And I think you hit the nail on the head when you said there's not a lot of education out there on trail cams and everything. I feel like I fall into this as well. Like when I go out and buy a trail cam, it was like I want quantity over quality. But then within a year or two, you're throwing that trail cam away. I've done it numerous times.
Right.
And, and then you're just in the longevity, you're spending more and more money year after year doing it, or, buying more cameras, and you're like, what the hell? You're scratching your head, and it's like, gosh dang, like I'm wrapping so much money up into it. And then your wife looks at you like, you need more trail cams. And I'm like, well, you got to understand these ones, I threw these ones out. And she's like, I feel like everybody goes through it, man.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where, prior to Exodus, that's exactly where we were as trail camera users and consumers. It was, jumping from brand or jumping from model to model, with new models coming out every year, trying to find out what would work best for us. And there is a time and place, I feel, where quantity does trump quality. It just kind of depends on the scenario. I mean, even the $25, $30 Tasco cameras that you can get certainly have their place in, certain people's arsenal. So yeah. Definitely don't want to come off as, if you're not using high-end or top-end trail cameras or gear, then you're doing it wrong, because that's certainly not the case.
Yeah, and that makes total sense. I mean, a lot of guys, some guys hunt over bait or something. It's just like, I just need one camera that goes over this and just needs to take a picture.
Exactly.
You get those guys, and it's like, well, I don't want to spend $30 or $40, and it's like, well, I guess you got this option. So
exactly.
I guess when Exodus, when you and your partners were building Exodus and like wanting to launch it, was it always something in your head that you wanted to be direct to consumer, or could it be an option where it's like, you are in a box store like Cabela's, Bass Pro, something like that?
No, it was really from the beginning consumer direct. And, in the early days, KUIU was just kind of getting their foothold in the Western apparel or hunting apparel space. And we followed their model pretty closely. But even outside of the hunting industry, we looked at companies like Purple, the Purple Mattress Company,
yep, and
all these larger e-commerce companies leveraging the internet. And we found ourselves, three, I'm going to say, normal guys. All three of us came from the construction industry. None of us really had deep pockets, and we started this company really with no money. I mean, we started with like 60 or 70 grand, and we pretty much bootstrapped and taught ourselves how to do everything from, product development, marketing. I mean, just top to bottom of running a company. Like, we had no experience. We just figured it out as we went. But because of that, we knew we had to leverage the internet as much as possible to make this thing work. And to be totally honest, we were way in over our heads. We were probably a little naive, a little bit ignorant, but excited and ambitious when we got going. And, the company's changed a lot since 2015. But I think, being ambitious and being driven and just being stubborn and too dumb to quit ultimately is what led us, to finding success. And I'm going to say success as being a profitable company. Yep. In 2018, 2019, and it seems like each year we're growing very substantially and taking just a tiny more chunk of market share. So it's been a unbelievable journey.
Yeah, and that's what so cool to me about like you guys hearing something like that. You guys are so driven. So to me as like a consumer wanting to get at this product, I know it's not going to be just a piece of crap product. I mean, you're driven enough to put your life and your family's life on the line to build this company, and you're not going to, you're not going to spit out something dumb and stupid and not work. You know what I mean? You're going to put all your energy and time into this and money, and it's ultimately you guys have built are building an empire, in my opinion. I mean, what I look at from a distance, you guys are a sexy brand, for a lack of a better word. I love, like, it's part of it. I'm a big sports guy, so it's like look good, feel good. You know what I mean? Like, if you look good, you're supposed to be there. You know what I mean? And when I look at Exodus, it's just a brand I look at, and you're like, I want to be a part of that somehow, some way, shape, or form. I want a sticker on my truck, or I want one of their, that is like a major part in my eyes in that. I mean, I don't know. I just feel like you guys are doing the right things. And, with being direct to consumer, I got to imagine there's got to be some bumps and everything down the road trying to get the knowledge out there about your cameras and everything. Would that be correct?
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely, obstacles to overcome. It's, that hurdle is becoming lesser and lesser, I think. And part of that is just a product of being in business 6 years versus 2 years. The first 2 or 3 years, we would get so many phone calls and emails and people, inquiring, saying they've never heard of us. Well, of course, we're not in any box stores. We're not in any retailers. We don't have a retail, a resellers program. So literally the only way you're going to find us is, through e-commerce, any marketing campaigns that we do through social, and our website, maybe Amazon, depending on our inventory levels. So there's, I've been lucky enough to have Jake pretty much by my side. Jake, I mentioned how the company has really evolved over the last 6 years. When we started, there were 2 other co-founders, my brother and one of my very good hunting friends. And unfortunately, things just didn't, we were going through some rough times. Things weren't jiving. So Jake had been interning for us at that time, and we brought him on full time while the original ownership was still in place. But then just a few months later, we decided to make a transition into different ownership and bought those guys out and moved on. And when it comes to, you mentioned branding and marketing, and that is really all Jake. I'd love to sit here and say that, yeah, I've done all that stuff, with my own two hands. But the reality of it is, Jake's a big part of our branding and marketing, and he definitely takes the lead and does the majority of the heavy lifting on that end. And I think that's one of the cool things. You start a business and start a brand, and you start it small. I mean, I can remember the days when just tiny little office or working out in the garage. And now we're bringing people on board and personnel on board, and you've seen guys go from an intern to owning part of the company into a leadership position, and now we have guys underneath of us who we're working towards other leadership positions. So, running a company is cool, running the brand is cool, and having it recognized nationally or whatever nationwide is cool. But the leadership aspect from growing the culture within the company, I think, is one of the coolest things. And it's unfortunate that not everybody gets to see that from the outside looking in. Right. But, inside this office and inside of our culture, to me, that's the biggest accomplishment is seeing people grow within our company. That's so cool. And I feel like it snowballs so quickly, it feels like, doesn't it? Yeah. One thing, you have like 6 employees, the next time you have like 30. It's like, wow, 2 years. Holy crap. How'd we grow that big? Right. Now from a leadership role like yourself and ownership and everything, do you feel like, the trail cam, like everything else, but the trail cam world is ever evolving, I feel like, constantly. I feel like if you don't jump on it now, it's like it's forgotten about. It's just like cameras in general, like photo cameras or video cameras. Yep. If you don't jump on it, it's like, it's gone. It's old news. Now, do you feel like, whether it's in your head, or do you feel like you need to stay ahead, like
every month, every year, like you need to be developing something new all the time? Do you have that feeling?
Yes and no. More so not. The trail camera space does move very fast. When you look at it, between all the major players and all the retailers, I guess the normal retail brands, every year people are spitting out new models, and regardless of what that development of that product included, there's not a whole lot changing. I think the biggest thing that has changed over the last 24 months is the move from standard SD card cameras to cellular cameras. I mean, they've finally, last year in 2020, it seemed like they finally hit critical mass. They finally hit mass social acceptance, and you've seen the market shift. So with that, in that regard, yes. But we take the kind of the Apple approach. Not that we're anything near Apple, but Apple's never been a company, relatively speaking, to have like the newest, greatest, most hip technology. They're focused on building and making efficient products to make workflow easier, the branding, the quality of the product, and to make the end user experience, the highest it can be. So that's kind of the approach that we take. We never, we're always working. Or I'm always working on R&D and looking at different chipsets and image sensors and different things of that nature. But we're never going to be a company that has millions of dollars to spend on R&D to spit out 10 new models a year. Like that's just, it'll never be us. I don't think there's a need for that in a marketplace in the way that we run our business. So we've since the beginning we've taken the approach at let's work on a product. When it's right and when it's done, we'll release it. It doesn't matter if it's June. It doesn't matter if it's July. It doesn't matter if it's January. When it's done and when it's right, we'll bring it to market. So that's kind of the approach that we've taken. And I think part of that goes back to having control, being D2C. Like we don't have to have a product at ATA, or we don't have to have a product at a buy group show for retailers to write orders. It's kind of on our time and on our timeline.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I could definitely see, if you were that company, obviously that's spitting out like 10 new products a year, that might be a way to also like expedite the price or expedite the process of possibly like outgrowing yourself, if that makes sense, or like really maybe the quality will go down, which you pride yourself on because you're just trying to spit out new things and try to stay ahead of the game. I totally get that. Yeah. I'm a firm believer in the Apple model. Like when we're designing something or even me editing a video or something for work, I like to look at the Apple, the Apple process. And when you look at their logo, it's like they've never changed their logo. It's an apple with a bite out of it. It's clean. It's
timeless.
Exactly. It's timeless. And you know what it is when you see it. And you know what you're getting for quality in a product. And I love that. I love it.
Yep.
Now, you guys offer 3 cameras right now. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so you were talking about cell cams. Now, with that shift of the cell cams, you guys have a cell cam. Now, was that like a big transition, or was it something like we got to jump on this now to really get something out there?
I think that we were. It was a little bit of both. We were starting to feel a little bit of pressure with, the uptick of 3G sales or 3G camera sales, primarily, mostly coming from Spartan. They've really been the leader in the cellular trail camera space, and probably still are, to be totally honest. So we knew, with cellular technology evolving and 4G starting to kind of be rolled out, that we needed to have a solution for a wireless or cellular trail camera. So jumping into that, there's a lot more. Oh man, there's so much more that goes into a cellular product versus a standard SD card camera. Not just on the camera side, but when you start looking at the cellular side and the certification process and the mobile application. People really underestimate the mobile application and the experience that a consumer has with that from a design standpoint. In our mind, it's like you buy a cell camera, and hopefully you're only handling that thing maybe once or twice a year, and it's out in the woods doing its thing.
Right.
But with the mobile app, like, you're interacting with that every single day. Like, the mobile app is the experience.
For sure.
It's the bigger part of the experience. And we went in circles and circles and circles on what to do with that. And none of us here are coders or developers. So we were looking at, what do we do here? Do we bring somebody in? Do we hire somebody and do this internally? Do we outsource it and, just pay maintenance fees as we need updates and to make changes and whatnot? And out of the blue, we got a cold email from a company that was building an application called Scout Tech. And those guys are out of Georgia. We ended up onboarding with them to offer that mobile app solution. So it was a good fit because they're coders, they're developers. They do it every single day so they can stay, up to date and current with any changes that needed to be taking place or updates with any apps. So they're really a big part of that. Scout Tech is really a big part of that render 4G cell camera that we offer, because again, the mobile application is as big or bigger part of that user experience than the actual physical product. So it was a big, that was a big project for us. That development on that went about 18-20 months. So, for anyone thinking about how fast or what it takes to get a product to market, that was definitely pushed us in every aspect.
That's really cool, and I love to hear that the experience to you guys is like a big thing, because that's what people are looking for now. They don't want to come somewhere and just one-stop deal. Like, the way I think is I want people to stay there. I want people to look at different things, and you offer different things on an experience. You want them to go there and have a story told to them, or convenience as well. Like, that's huge. That's awesome.
Right. Yep.
Now, with Exodus and everything, I love everything you guys do. I said that before, like the whitetail cribs and everything. I watch every one. Yeah. That's really cool. And that opens up, for me being a viewer of that, it opens up a lot of avenues to people that, I didn't even know existed. Guys that have bucks on their wall, that there's 100 deer on their wall, and it's like, oh my God, and they're giants. Yeah. These guys you never heard of. I'm like, man, that's really cool, and to hear their story. But that's neat how you do that, and that's just, that right there is a good marketing tool to me. I mean, you took an idea, obviously, that was already out there, but made it into our space and nailed it. Personally, I think you did. But what are some of those ways? I'm kind of getting to the experience and getting your education, your knowledge out there. What are some of those ways that you guys are looking forward to getting more info out there from Exodus about your cameras, about your business and everything, other than just your website, on YouTube or digital, ads, stuff like that?
Well, for us, we kind of take the Gary V approach of the web 2.0.
Yep.
We're not running a bunch of ads or hitting people buy now. Here, we're the best trail camera company. We've never taken that approach, and our approach was, if you offer value, you'll be able to gain people's attention, and then to hold that attention, you have to continually offer value, and then at some point when you have that value or that attention, value-based trust, then you can leverage that into sales. And that's really the approach that we've taken from the beginning. We started a podcast a couple years ago, and the podcast, we try to travel around and do most of our interviews in person when we can. And the first thing that happens when you show up to somebody's house and talk deer hunting is they take you in their trophy room or where they have their mounts, and they want to talk and tell the stories. And we're like, we should just do a podcast about this.
Yep.
And then that turned into hey, let's just make a spin-off of MTV Cribs, and the rest, I guess, is history. But the YouTube stuff has been a big resource on just putting out educational videos, and anybody goes and watches any of the stuff that any of the production stuff we're putting out on YouTube, next to zero of it is us talking about we're the latest, greatest, best trail camera company. It's us trying to offer that value and educating people on how PIR sensors work. What's the best way to place a camera on a trail? How to get better nighttime images? How what settings can save battery life in a cell camera? Just top to bottom, 99% of the stuff that we do is educational. If you go to our blog, if you get on Google and type anything in, what's the best SD card for a trail camera? One of our blogs pops up. If you type in, what are the best trail camera batteries? Our blog pops up. Yeah. So a lot of the stuff that people are craving or searching or wanting to learn, that's where we focused most of our, I want to call them marketing efforts, but essentially it's efforts in us becoming that authoritative figure in educating people in this space, and in return, it turns into marketing.
Yeah, that's cool, and I like to hear you talk about like what are the settings that make your camera last longer. Like I don't even know that, you know what I mean? Like I do mess with trail cam settings on my trail cams, but then I always use lithium batteries. I just feel like I'm a firm believer in lithiums, and
absolutely,
you have to, in my opinion. Alkalines and whatever other batteries out there, the Walmart batteries, they just don't cut it. Maybe in the summer when it's like blistering hot, they'll last a little bit longer, but I mean, lithiums last by far the longest. So that's cool that you guys are diving in that detail. That to me alone shows like how much you put into your product and how much, you care about everything and the consumer. You care about changing their way and ultimately saving them money in the long run too.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, I kind of want to do a hard transition here. Talked a little bit about that, but I want to kind of get into your hunting, your trail cam strategies, and different ways that you apply these strategies. First and foremost, I guess the question is that I want to know is how many trail cams are you personally running?
Oh, I have anywhere, it depends on the time of the year, but anywhere from 50 to 100 cameras out, personally. Come fall, that number creeps up towards 100 or maybe touch over 100. I think last year I have a labeling system for all my cameras, and when you start running that amount of cameras, it takes some serious organization to keep everything stinking straight. So in that labeling system, I can remember putting out like camera 104 or something.
Oh my gosh.
So I know it's right around there. This time of year, I do a lot of stuff on public, so a lot of times in February I'll go back and I pull a lot of cameras down, and then bring them in, clean them up, do my winter maintenance or whatever, and then I'll deploy them back out in the summertime. So right now I maybe 30, 40, 50 cameras.
Okay.
This time of year, that's about average.
And right now, so like we're recording this early April, like what are you trying to capture? Like what is your strategy for trail cams? Like what are you hoping to get?
Not much right now, honestly. I've already done all my postseason surveys. I know what deer have made it. We're kind of past shed season, coming into turkey season. There's really not a whole lot that I'm personally running cameras for. If there's a specific deer, something very specific I'm trying to figure out on a deer that I have previous history with, I'll leave cameras out in that area and just try to maybe pinpoint or gather additional information on different travel routes or where he's spending time or food sources. But this time of year is really the trail camera, what we call a trail camera lull. I don't personally think there is actually a whole lot of valuable information that you can gain right now. If you haven't done your postseason survey stuff and have tabs on what your deer herd looks like or what kind of doe population or buck population or the overall health of the deer on your property. If you haven't gotten that figured out, I think you could still do that now. But outside of that, there's nothing that I'm running cameras for right now to put into place come October and November to kill a buck.
Okay. I was just curious. I didn't know if it was turkey scouting or, if it's what are you usually, because I usually in the past I've kept cameras out all year, and honestly some of it was just being lazy, but other parts was just being like I want to see where the deer are yarding up and how they're using a certain area still at this time, but then it's just like I'm spending more in batteries and more wear and tear on your camera, and I just took them down. And now like this time of year I'm using some of my cell cams for security reasons, and I like doing
Absolutely.
that. And so that's kind of my tactic right now. But
Yeah.
you mentioned winterizing your cameras, or getting them cleaned up and everything. Like, what are some of your processes that you take that actually help saving a camera, or with the longevity of everything?
Yeah, well, the first thing that we do is get the cameras in. I basically just clean them up, wipe them down, or take an air duster, keyboard cleaner, get all the grime and crap, tree sap and dirt and stuff off of them. Take the battery tray out, take the batteries out. I actually take little silica packs that you could buy, 50 of them on Amazon for like $20, and I just throw a silica pack in the camera and make sure the firmware is current or up to date. And that's pretty much it. Leave the batteries out, take the SD card out, just basically clean them up, make sure the firmware's up to date, and I pack them away with those silica packs, and then I basically just leave them in the office or in my garage until usually May, June is when I start to put cameras back out. So, nothing real complicated. Make sure the firmware's up to date, clean them up, and just make sure you're storing them in a dry, a decent place.
Yep. Dry is definitely key. I ruined a couple cameras not doing that. Yeah. You'll learn quick when you open up your camera bag in like June, July, when you're trying to get them out, and it's like, the batteries are corroded, or not the batteries, but everything's corroded in there, and you're like, well, now I got to get a new tray or get a new camera or something like that, and it's disaster. But I guess with the cell cam craze, have you really yourself, transitioned to more cell cams, or are you kind of like 50-50?
I have not transitioned to more cell cameras, only because I hunt almost primarily public ground in Ohio, and it's a pretty remote section or part of the state, and cell coverage is it's just too limited for me to put them to good use. A lot of times when I'm down there, I find myself hunting for a camera location based on cell service rather than deer data.
Okay.
And so, I do have some cell cameras out on ridge tops and, areas where I can get service, but the majority of the cameras that I'm using there on that public land setting are just regular SD card cameras. But back home, we have, there's probably 20 cell cameras scattered around different properties, keeping tabs on different deer or using them for security, like you mentioned earlier. But, in this stage of my hunting career, I guess you could call it that, the county that we live in just doesn't offer the kind of deer that I want to hunt. So I often find myself traveling, 4, 5, 6 hours to even hunt in my own state. So it's a little bit crazy on that end. But on the flip side of that, for any out-of-state trips, I know that we're getting ready to. I just applied for Kansas with a point in my pocket yesterday.
Oh, you'll draw.
Yeah, exactly. I should draw guaranteed. So in May, we're going to go out and turkey hunt, and then put some cell cameras out. As long as I still have to read some regs there to make sure I'm not violating anything. But that's the plan. And so in an out-of-state scenario, I think, or even a lease scenario, or anywhere where you're driving any sizable amount of distance, I think that's obvious. One of the obvious benefits of cell cams.
Yeah, and I've equated it before. Different farms, different types of farms. Like I have 2 farms here in Michigan. One is a small woodlot farm, and the other one is like big timber. That small woodlot farm is exclusive, like cell cams. 4 acres or less is where I'm putting cell cams, because I'm mainly using those cell cams for making sure I'm not bumping deer out of there when I'm going in, and that's huge for me. I had a scenario last year where I was going into the stand, and I was about 100, 150 yards away from my stand, and before I got in the timber, I kind of like refreshed, and there were deer underneath my stand and the buck I was trying to kill already. So it was, some people might say that's not fair, but that's about as far as I take it. Like, I would never say, okay, he's in there, I'm going to go shoot him with a gun or something like that. Right. But it is very beneficial in the time that I have to be able to put forth hunting with my job and everything. Like, I'm trying to, dot all my I's and cross all my T's. Like, I'm trying to stay meticulous with everything. But those smaller woodlots, I really find cell cams being very beneficial.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's, the time savings, the efficiency, and then, cutting down on human intrusion are, those are the biggest factors using a cell camera. Not, being able to keep tabs on what is going on without intruding, I think is, it's worth more than any cell camera that you pay for. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's awesome.
100%.
It's just awesome.
It really is. And, I figured I would have to start taking up basket weaving or something, because I was spending way too much time in timber when I shouldn't have been. And, I bought 2 cell cams, and I'm like, I didn't have that urge to go check them anymore, because every morning I'd wake up and I'd have pictures to look at. I'm like, okay, I got my fix. Right. I'm good. And just go on with your day. So it's really helped with my success, to be honest with you.
Yeah. I think ultimately, even with guys running regular SD card cameras, I think that's one of the biggest mistakes people make, is checking their cameras too often. As earlier in the podcast, or maybe it was off air, we were talking about, how your camera strategies have evolved, and personally, and ours have really too. When you really have that amount of cameras that we run, which is not typical for a normal person, but just after a couple of years of running the large amount of cameras, the amount of data that you pull and can reference really changed the way we were looking at pictures and the way that we started running cameras in the following years. And with standard SD card cameras, we've really taken more of a long-term or annual approach to how we run those cameras, where we're using specific information on specific deer for the next season. That is not anything new. Don Higgins was writing and talking about that in 2012, 2013. But for us, it just didn't really click or make sense until we started to see it with our own eyes with our cameras.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess when I was talking about my evolving as, a camera guy, before, I always thought that I needed to have history with this buck, or, I needed to know he was there all the time. Since I was not successful with that, and having to come to Jesus with myself and figuring out, well, you're in there way too much, I've since taken majority of my cameras, and I'll put them in spots that I've never put them before, like good spots, I feel like, but I've never hunted them or have never been in that area, and I'll just let them marinate the whole year.
Exactly.
If I get a wild hair in my butt and it's like a rainy day, just a terrible day, and I know I can get in there to go check it, I might do that. But I'll tell you, in the last 3 years, pulling those cameras after season and going back and figuring out that there was a shooter buck early October, like, for instance, this area, one of these areas on my family farm, never hunted it, never nothing, didn't have a tree stand. I was like, I'm going to put a camera on this really hard used trail coming out of this bedding to see what happens. Well, from October 10th to October 25th, there was 18 different bucks in daylight using this camera or using this trail, and I would have never known that. And right. I think over half of them were shooter bucks. And it's like the next year we had a stand in there, knew we needed to hunt it at that time. One of my buddies went in there and actually missed a really good buck the first time in, and we're like, holy shit. So that was really eye-opening. And then it just evolved to the cell cams. I've got 2 cell cams that I like to use, but like I said, I use those just for, yes, I like to monitor things, but in the smaller acre pieces where I don't want to go in there at all, that's where I really, really try to hone in on those cameras in those spots.
Right. Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. And is that something that you kind of did as well with your, before you owned Exodus and still ran cameras? Were you kind of in that same ballpark of checking them too much, and then once you wanted to take your trail cam game to the next level, and then really started thinking, I need to think about this differently? Was that kind of the same thing?
Yeah. I think that's probably the common case with a lot of people. So before I really made a transition to hunting bigger woods or big wood pieces. I grew up hunting a family farm, 150 acres, which now has turned into almost 400 or 500 acres. But growing up hunting that, it wasn't. It was a piece where any decent deer hunter could go in and you would kill 150 or have a chance at a 150 every single year. I mean, it was a primo piece of ground. If you paid attention to the wind and just didn't do anything really dumb, hunting through the rut, you'd have a chance at a good buck. But then as I started to evolve and like hunting during the rut is one thing, but wanting to kill a deer like on its own terms, or, in the early season where it was, I guess, bad juju to go hunt deer, in October because it's not November. At least in my family, it was like something that you just didn't do. It changed because I wanted to run cameras. I wanted to know what was going on. And then the more and more you went in there, the less fruitful that became. As we started to kind of figure out what the heck was going on there, at that time, I had already started transition into big woods hunting, which, we live in Northeast Ohio, so it's one of the more populated areas in the state. So we had to drive several hours to, go do anything or check cameras or to get it on any good leases or public ground. So it was never, once I made that transition, it was never that we were checking cameras every couple of weeks because it just didn't fit into life. We couldn't just drive 3 hours one way and go check cameras every week.
Right.
So it turned into like a monthly thing. But then even beyond that, when we got to Exodus and we started running just a vast amount of cameras, when you have 100 cameras in the woods, you can't go around and check all of them. It's impossible, especially in the big woods where you're walking a mile or 2 miles between cameras. Like, it's just not physically possible. So we would set cameras up in new locations, and we would pre-scout or postseason scout these and say, okay, these are the areas we want to run cameras, and we'd go hang cameras and then just not go check them till the next, the following postseason. And then what we came to, like, the realization that we found was year over year over year, just like what you said, bucks will tend to do the same thing within a couple of days. So when we have daylight photos of certain deer on, a scrape or in a certain area or around a bedding area or a food source, as long as the variables remain the same the following year, those deer are going to do the same thing.
Yep, exactly.
And that's really what, that was really the big thing that changed our strategy, or my strategy.
Yeah, definitely. And actually, you just made me think of a scenario I had this year in a camera I put deep in, kind of on the edge of our swamp and our family farm, and there was a buck that we were trying to hone in on, and the neighbor ended up killing him. But as I went back and checked that camera after season, I figured out he was living in about a 3 acre to 5 acre little area, and for 5 days straight, he was on that camera in daylight. And
Wow.
It was like, but when you think about it, when you get that information and then you really think about why was he there? Well, nobody was there. Nobody goes back there. You know what I mean? Like, he knew he was secluded. He knew he was safe, and he was just doing deer things, like big buck things. Like, it's so cool to see that in his own element. And honestly, another thing that helped me was running cameras on video mode. Video mode, I learned a lot, just deer behavior alone.
Yes.
And this deer alone, in 5 days, I think I had probably over 20 to 30 videos of them, and it's crazy to see, like, when you only run pictures, it's like, okay, he's coming from the right and he leaves to the left. It's like, but then I've flipped that to video. When you think he's coming from the right, he actually came in from in front of the camera, looped way around, and you think he comes from behind the camera when really you just didn't know. And
Exactly.
Video mode has been a game changer for me. Do you kind of feel the same way?
100%. And I was always stubborn about running video mode because my camera's set for so long that I'm worried about cards filling up or buying bigger capacity cards, running them, and then of course battery life and whatnot. But Jake's been a big proponent of, or fan of, running video mode in all of his cameras. So as I've kind of transitioned into that, I've seen the same exact thing. There's no needed, or I shouldn't say no, but you're less likely to have to draw conclusions that you talked about.
Right.
Because there's just more evidence of what that deer is doing, and then also his behavior as far as his personality. Is he aggressive? Is he passive?
100%.
So there's just a lot more information. If you're a guy looking to target specific deer, running cameras on video mode is the only way to do it.
It's really fun too when you get some of the coolest videos. I mean, does beating the heck out of each other, or a fawn and a mom interacting. Like, it's so cool, and you learn so much about deer behavior, in my opinion.
Yep.
What would be the Chad Sylvester like settings that he would run for a video to put on video camera to get the best out of that, to have the most, because like you said, and I'm even worried about, my card's going to fill up. Like, what card would you be using, and what would be the settings you'd be using? Now, I know things vary. You might have it on a food plot or a corn pile if you can, or something. Like, I know that varies, but what would be your like go-to settings and card selection for that? The
very most important thing, I think, when it comes to trail camera placement is making the things not noticeable to deer. And I'll start there, because I think oftentimes guys are scouting, they find a scrape or something, and they throw that camera up right in a deer's face. And I know every deer is different, and a lot of deer don't care, but we have like this spook-proof equation, I guess that's what we call it, that we kind of try to go through to hide our cameras, to make them less obvious to deer. Because a lot of times when we're placing these cameras, if we're getting daylight activity, like, we're hunting where that camera is.
Right, exactly.
So we're trying to always put our cameras no closer than 20 feet to the area that we want to monitor. So if that's a scrape or a trail, we're at least 20 feet away from that. We always want to be perpendicular, not parallel to that target, just because that's the way PIR sensors work. We're trying to get that thing, 6 to 8 feet off the ground. We don't like belly or chest high. We like to be a little higher than that, but we don't want it so high that you're creating a void in the detection zone. A lot of times we're not using straps. We're using paracord to make that less noticeable. We're trying to put it on a bigger tree where the camera's not profiled, or if you have a split trunk tree. So a lot of the stuff that you would think about, like hanging a stand, we're doing that when we hang our cameras as well, just at different elevations, of course.
Yeah, that's interesting.
When you get into settings for video mode, for the longest time, I would just run 30-second videos. And that was, 30 seconds is good, just because, I don't know, it seemed like a whole round number. 30 seconds seemed like enough time. So, that's where I started. But then the more data I collected and reviewed, I found that 30 seconds was like 8 to 12 seconds too short. So now I'm actually running 45-second videos.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
Just to get that additional information. But you can combat that a little bit with trigger delay. If your camera can run a shorter trigger delay, you can run a shorter trigger delay and not have to worry about that longer video, because if you have a 1 second recovery time, 1 second trigger delay, if that deer is still in frame after that 30 seconds, you're only going to miss a second of that video. So some of it depends on, the specifications of what camera you're using.
Right.
But like in a food plot setting, or if on a scrape, I will run that 45-second video mode, and I will still run the shortest trigger delay I can run. I'm throwing the largest capacity card I can run, which in our case, it's a 64 gig card. And that's pretty much it. Now, if I get in a situation where I'm running cameras in a static environment is what we would consider like bait stations, feeders, mineral sites, areas where you can kind of dictate deer movement. You can put them in that space or that spot, and they're going to spend a lot amount of time there. Then I'm running a little bit shorter video clip. I'll go back down to 30 seconds. I'll run a longer trigger delay, like maybe a minute or two, because deer are going to be frequenting that area because it's high traffic, high interest because of the food or the bait or whatever that's there. And I know that they're going to spend a bunch of time there, so I don't need to run a short trigger delay and have 50 videos of the same doe family group or whatnot. So I think, when there's different settings applicable to different scenarios. So the first thing I think you need to think about when you're setting cameras up, go through the spook equation thing, and then try to ask yourself, is this a dynamic setting where deer can kind of come through here and move, and they're not, the movement's not defined, and they're just passing through, and they're not spending a lot amount of time there? Or is it a static environment where, you can pinpoint and put deer where you want them, and they're going to spend a bunch of time there? So those are, and both scenarios are going to result in completely, different settings, but general settings, 30 to 45 second video settings. I put the longest or the biggest capacity card you can fit in there. Make sure you're running Energizer lithium batteries. You're getting 2.5 or 3 times the capacity out of those versus alkaline batteries. And then the rest is kind of subjective to what else is going on in that specific area.
That's awesome. That's great information, especially spook proof in your that. It's something that I think about as well, but I don't give myself a standard of 20 feet, you know what I mean? Or profile, and that's great information to go through. And the paracord idea, I think I'm gonna switch everything over to paracord. I feel like so all the straps are so and so much less obtrusive too. I mean, that's a great idea. Now with the video mode, because I run a lot of mine on 30-second videos. Mm-hmm. Now, what was it that triggered you that you needed more video time?
Well, there was 2 specific sets. One I can think of, it's a big primary scrape between bedding areas. And it's in hill country. On a lower 1/3, there's a bench in a lower 1/3, giant scrape there. A couple hundred yards to the north. A couple hundred yards to the north, there's a bedding point. And then a couple hundred yards to the south, there's doe bedding up on top. And often I would find, deer would, this is specifically through November, late October, November, but I would get does coming down that ridge, down the hillside, and that video would be, 15 seconds. And then 10 seconds later, I'd have a 5-second clip of a buck coming through there. And then there would be, a 5-second trigger delay. And then the next video would be a series of another buck and another buck. And I just want to be able to get all of that in one video and not have to draw conclusions of, in that 5-second trigger delay, did that doe cut in front of the camera and go back to the south, or did she head north, or is it just a buck train following that doe and she's out of the frame of the camera? So it's just a matter of, we talked about running video mode versus photo mode, not having to draw those conclusions. And for me, just extending that video time by 15 seconds seemed to take some of those take
conclusions out of there.
Yeah, it seemed to take some of me having to draw those conclusions out of the equation. And it's still, 45 seconds is still a happy medium where, you're not watching, a 2-minute video. You're going through hundreds or thousands of 2-minute videos.
Right. And anytime you can take guesswork out of the game in hunting world, I feel like it's a plus, because I feel like a lot of times we're just throwing darts at the wall.
That's it. That's it. Yeah. It's funny, regardless, as hunters, and I'm sure you do this, I find myself doing this a lot, is, you have all this information, you have what you think is the most solid game plan in the world, and you go in to hunt, a deer or do whatever, hunt a property a couple times, and it's like you couldn't be further off than
I agree. I feel like turkey hunting's the same way. They're like humbling creatures.
It is.
It's they're the smartest dumb bird out there. It's like, oh man, that bird's in a perfect spot for me. Let's go get him. And then he sees you, open up the latch door of the truck, and you're like, oh,
It's over before it starts.
And I feel like we just give deer too much credit, and a lot of times, when they're really just out there surviving, and they're very smart creatures. But I mean, I feel like us being humans, we're like, we want it to be this, and this is what they do. It's got to be so black and white, cut and dry. That's what we're looking for, and it just never happens that way.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. Well, I've got a couple more questions here, and what do you have a scenario that anytime that you've ever killed a buck, that you've killed that buck because of trail cam data?
Specifically because of trail camera data, not really. I've never killed a specific deer because I've gotten a specific picture of him, or one nighttime picture and said, okay, this deer is going to be killable at this time because he's in this bedding location. It's never seemed to work out for me in that manner. Now I've had plenty of encounters with specific deer because of that, but not been able to seal the deal on them.
Yeah.
So I've been able to put myself in positions on specific deer because of trail cameras. But there's a running joke inside our office: if somebody's going to screw something up, it's going to be me.
That's funny. Now, do you feel like in your own mind that trail cams have hurt you more or helped you more in being successful?
No, I definitely think that they help. There's no doubt about that. I think that they can hurt you if you use them wrong, if you're too dependent on them, if you think that they're the end all be all and you're not scouting. I think they can have their disadvantages, or like we talked about earlier, checking them too often. So there are some downsides to them, but when they're used right and used in conjunction with scouting, especially just regular SD card cameras are a great benefit. But I honestly think cellular cameras are the biggest benefit modern day deer hunters have seen since the modern day firearm. There's to be able to remotely monitor deer activity on your property without being intrusive. It changes the entire game.
Yeah.
So I definitely think they've helped me, and they help everyone else more than they hurt. For
sure. Now, when the whole cell cam shift happened, like that whole thing came, and now it's like huge. Like, that's all people get. I feel like. What's your personal opinion on them? Obviously you're part of a trail cam, you own a trail cam company, and you design a cell cam, but like, what is is there too far that we can go with this, or are we flirting with the line? Like, what's your take on that?
Well, I think, the camera itself it's an inanimate object. It's a tool. So I look at it as a lot like firearms, like a gun is a tool, and it's up to the person using it to take moral or ethical actions with that tool. I think that you can certainly cross the line in ethics with cell cameras, stringing them out, placing one over a bed and having a bunch of them on different exit trails and knowing exactly what that deer does. I think that is starting to cross the line. But then again, what's the difference of doing that in a wooded timber lot, or going to western Kansas, parking a mile away and glassing a deer,
right,
stand up from his bed and watch him? So it's like, I don't think this argument will probably ever be settled, because
we'll
there's
never.
it's just one of those things where everyone's going to have a different opinion and a different view, and I think that they all should be listened to. But I think at the end of the day, it lies upon the hunter and what they deem ethical and moral, and how they use that tool.
Yep.
I know that's probably like a cliche answer, but at the end of the day, if you think it's ethical to use that tool in a certain way, then you're okay with it. By all means, use it in that manner.
Yeah. No, I agree, and I honestly think, like you said, that the argument will never be settled, because it's like, to me, it's like mechanical versus fixed broadheads. That will never ever. I don't know how many times, and I even bring it up on the podcast too, like, just because I want to get a rise out of somebody, but it'll never get settled. I like Chevy, you might like Ford. Like, that'll never get settled. It's agree to disagree kind of thing. But I agree. It's the ethical decisions are in the hands of the person that's doing everything. In my personal opinion, I feel like if you have a cell cam and you're monitoring a corn pile in gun season and from the house, and you see he's there and you can walk out in a field and shoot him, I feel like that's completely wrong. Right. There's no sport to that. There's no, not to say it needs to be a sport, but you know what I mean? It's just right, like shooting fish in a barrel, then why do it?
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like everybody, I feel like, I hate to even say this, but in my opinion, hunting is somewhat of a selfish sport, especially when you start hunting bigger deer. You're kind of isolating yourself a little bit. Mm-hmm. Things become somewhat serious, and some of the fun is taken out of it, some of the camaraderie. And I just lost where the heck I was going with that. But I guess everybody's hunting for their own, personal satisfactions or their personal reason. And I think that we get in trouble as hunters to try to project what we think is a requirement or required experience for the next person, because
right.
Maybe that guy only has a day or 2 days to hunt. So he's out there for 2 days. He shoots the first deer that walks by. Like, it's his tag. It doesn't, like, who cares?
He paid for it. He could be terminally ill,
Yeah, it could be the last deer that you ever killed. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
No, I agree. And I think that comes from a lot of the younger, more, maybe less mature, because I was there.
Oh, me too.
I was always the guy that was like, man, why are the neighbors shooting that? Or, I want to shoot bigger deer. And it's, yeah. And now I'm going to be 34 here soon. and I've waved bye-bye to that little dickhead about 10 years ago. You know what I mean? It just, if you're upset at that stuff, then you're the problem, really.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
They're just having fun and you're missing out, and once the sooner you can realize that, the more fun you're going to have.
Yep.
And, but yeah, I definitely agree. I guess I've hit all my questions. Trying to look through my notes here. I've got one here. It might be a little broad, but in your opinion, what would be the best time during the fall? And I know this is very situational, but for you, what is the best time during the fall to check your cameras?
Well, I will check, and this kind of goes against the grain of everything that we've talked about thus far, but during the rut, I'll give a couple scenarios. So during the rut, I will check my cameras as often as I need to be confident in an area or spot. I think that deer they'll tolerate a whole lot more during the first 2 weeks, the 3 weeks of November versus the earlier part of October. So with that, I will check my cameras as often as needed through the rut. Backing up, I will always pull cards and check cameras around the August 20th date. I've heard this Mark Jury talk about the date of August 18th with deer or bucks returning to their fall range around that August 16th to August 20th time frame.
Yep.
And I've heard him talk about that multiple times, and I've seen that happen on more than one occasion with our cameras on specific deer. So I've always used that August 20th kind of as a benchmark. So that would be my first kind of tail end check going into the fall.
Okay.
And then really trying to figure out that shift once bucks go hard-horned. Either they break up from their velvet groups.
Yep.
And kind of relocate a little bit. So typically that last weekend prior to season, I like to at least give myself a 7-day buffer. And usually I'm not hunting in the early season a whole lot anyways, but 7 days prior to the season, I'll go in and check. So there's usually a 30-day span between August 20th and, the end of September whenever I'm going to check cameras. And then from, through October, I'm not really checking cameras a whole lot unless I have a really good weather day to check cameras on, which essentially would be a crappy day to hunt or whatnot. Or if it's an area that I can just get into and I know how it's just clean access. But a lot of that too is, if you have cameras on the edge of fields or food sources and you're not being intrusive, it's probably okay to go check those a little more frequent than going trouncing through, staging areas or stuff that's tight to bedding. As long as, you're not blowing your scent everywhere, I think that you're okay. And then towards the late season, I get more conservative. Deer have been pressured, they've been bumped around, they've been moved around, they know they're being hunted. So I'm really just trying to check cameras every couple weeks at the most, if on a target deer if he's still alive. But typically it can even go a little bit longer than that, and only go in and check those when I'm going in to hunt. Because a lot of times in the big woods, I have cameras set up, within bow range of where I'm hunting. So I try to put those, have good access to those cameras. I'll check them on my way in to hunt that stand or that location. Yep,
I gotcha. That's all great information and I know it could be very situational. That's more broad strokes, I'm guessing, of what you're doing. Because I kind of do the same thing. If I've got a camera, I don't know, maybe it helps me, maybe it hurts me more, I don't know, but I tend to put more cameras like right by my stand locations or in areas that I know I'm going to be hunting that I could just, as I walk by, pull the camera out and everything. I don't know if that's helpful or hurtful, I don't know. But sometimes I will say I do latch on sometimes, depending on how the flow of the season's going, I can latch on to, I'm not going to go to that stand because there's no bucks on camera or, no bucks that I want to go after, when it's really like, you're only picking up so much of what that camera's seeing, so it's like...
Exactly.
It just depends on how the flow of the season's gone.
Yeah.
How long you've been grinding it out, and have you killed a deer or not, so...
Yeah, yep, absolutely.
Well, man, I appreciate you coming on and doing this. Thank you very much. Hopefully your experience was an experience. I know you've done a lot of podcasts, and you have a podcast yourself, but hopefully... everything I asked wasn't too tough, and hopefully we can do this again sometime.
Yeah, absolutely, Aaron. I'd love to. It was fun.
Yeah. Before we do get off here, I do want you to shout out Everything Exodus, where they can find all your content, where they can buy your cameras. Direct everybody to that right now.
Okay. So throughout social, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, it's just at Exodus Trail Cameras. Our website is exodusoutdoorgear.com. And then the podcast is Trail Cam Radio, found wherever you download podcasts.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you very much, Chad. I greatly appreciate it, and hopefully we can do this again.
Absolutely.
There you have it, another great episode. Chad, thank you very much for coming on and doing this. We'll have to get a part 2 lined up here soon and get you on to do some more talking. So thank you very much. And also, everybody, thank you again for all the downloads, all the support. Please go to iTunes, leave a 5-star rating, and leave a written review. Just type it in there. You don't physically write it, but you do with the keyboard. If that makes sense. Go in there and type out a written review. I would greatly appreciate that. Thank you guys very much. Also, tell a friend if you really like like this episode and the podcast. The word of mouth is a very strong thing, and I appreciate everybody doing that. So with that being said, I'm going to cut everyone loose here. Thank you guys very much, and don't forget, next week we'll be right here on the Fall Podcast.